We continue this morning in a series that we've been going through this fall, thinking about things that disciples do. We've talked about how disciples are generous, about how disciples take faith seriously, about how disciples seek to follow Jesus. This morning we turn our attentions to something that gets phrased in the negative, but maybe it really is more in the positive. We're thinking about disciples as people who don't judge. But if we need to be reminded that disciples are people who don't judge, maybe that's because more often than we'd like to admit, we disciples are people who do judge. Richard Rohr, a Franciscan priest and leader in the contemplative movement, invites people into this stance. He encourages folks to see everything, to judge little, and to forgive much. Nadia Bolz-Weber, a fiery and active Lutheran pastor who founded a church down in Denver and has become somewhat of a public figure, shared about her journey into meditation and contemplation. Nadia wasn't much for meditation, but when the pandemic hit, she had a lot of time. And she decided that she would give this meditation thing one more go around. And after about 18 months or so of being in isolation, living in a rhythm of daily prayer and contemplation, growing more aware of herself and of her life before God, some things began to take root. So much so that after she got those initial rounds of COVID vaccines and was told the gates were open, we can all go back out and do the things again, and she did just that and left meditation behind, she realized one day that she was having a meditation moment. You see, she had gotten on what is sometimes referred to in contemplative circles as the monkey mind train. If you've ever tried to practice contemplative prayer or just sit quietly, you might notice that that's when those things like the grocery list, the lawn that needs to be cut, the task from 3 weeks ago that still hasn't been done, the laundry that's not folded, that's when those things start to come up, isn't it? That monkey mind train just pulls us on down, and before we even realize that we got on it, we are far off and far away and no longer present here and now. Well, Nadia realized that she was on her own monkey mind train, and her monkey mind train had taken her into a place of criticism and judgment. She was shoulding all over the place. My partner should be getting ready faster. He's making us late. The person driving in the left lane, camping's for the mountains, not for the left lane of the freeway. They're only going 4 over, and they should be going 5. The coffee that the barista just handed me should be hotter than this. I should not have to be on hold with Delta Airlines for this long. Nadia realized all of the shoulds that were pouring out as she was on this train of judgment and criticism. But she caught herself. She decided to step off the train. She remembered a conversation that she had had with one of her friends, Sarah, some years before, in which she was going through the litany of shoulds and oughts and how the world isn't what it should be according to her, and all the things that were so far removed from what should be happening. And finally, Sarah broke into the litany and said, Nadia, you're absolutely right. You are right about all of it. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if all you're going to do is should all over the people around you and yourself. Nadia included this little reflection into the foray of a monkey mind train, reflecting on her friend Phil that was performing a funeral for a local musician in his town. The service was filled with other musicians and artists offering the gifts, the creative gifts that they brought. And Nadia said Phil was reflecting afterwards that the folks who gathered to remember and give thanks for their dear friend, gone all too soon from this world, had a choice at that service and in that moment. They could be critical of the music and the art that was offered. They could judge a flat pitch here, a sharp pitch there, an out of beat, a mismark, a poet that maybe didn't quite complete the rhyme. They could judge all of that and live in that critical space, or they could just let themselves be healed by the music. I think we often get caught in the shoulds. We often get hung up on what should be, or in our worst moments, maybe we're a little like that Pharisee that Jesus talks about in his story today. We're pretty confident of all the things that we do that others should be doing. We give 10%. We come to church several times a week. We know all the prayers. We know the final verse of hymn 275. You can look it up later. We've got it down. But those folks over there, they don't. They don't have it down. They're a broken mess. But we have it all sorted out. Go us. We get caught up in that. We get so caught up in that sometimes we can even look in the mirror, begin to judge ourselves when things don't go quite as perfect as that shiny veneer makes it seem. We can be pretty harsh with ourselves. But maybe afraid of what that might mean about us, we turn our eyes to those others. We distance ourselves from them. After all, they must have done something to deserve that lot in life, that hand that they've been dealt. It couldn't just be systems and challenges and not starting at the same place as others. When polled several years ago by the Barna Group, non-Christians, folks who don't come to church every week, said that one of their biggest perceptions of Christians was that they're people who are judgmental. They're people who exclude others, who push people out for one reason or another. If we were to give that survey today, I'm afraid we probably wouldn't score much better on the whole. I fear that the perception of who we are as God's people, as who we are as disciples of Jesus, has perhaps only gotten worse in that measure. And yet, we have this story about Jesus, telling a story to others who thought more of themselves than perhaps they should, and warned them of the dangers of being confident of developing a righteousness, a right relationship with God and other people based on their own merit, on what they do and accomplish, rather than on the sheer grace and mercy of God. we have this story that calls us back and reminds us that we are all sinners in need of God's grace. That while we might think we're the Pharisee and we have it all going together, that's never a reason to judge others or dismiss others. But all of those shoulds that Nadia dropped around, that we drop around, they push others away. They create a barrier between us and God and keep us from experiencing the love that God has for us and the love that God calls us to share with others. And so that invitation for us today is, I think, twofold. To look and acknowledge that the ways that we are often like that Pharisee, that we often put ourselves on a pedestal and should the world around us. But the second part of that invitation is to embrace the stance of the tax collector. To stand before God and set aside our shame and be honest about our brokenness and ask for mercy. And know that God is a God of love who gives us mercy and grants us a possibility, a path into new relationship with God that leads us into new and right relationship with one another. So we have that choice. We can either sit and be critical of the music, or we can allow ourselves to be healed by it. Friends, I hope that you will be healed by it. And being healed by it, I hope that you will go out and offer healing to others. Amen.